I suspected my wife was pregnant, and my pie provided me with photo and video evidence of her adultery. So I did it. Elizabeth Miller and I attended high school together. I knew it, but she did not. She grew up with broad shoulders, a small waist, thin hips, and a height of 5'8", a natural-born athlete. Unfortunately, I was late in developing, graduating from high school at 5'8". I have a thin chest, tiny legs, and weigh 140 pounds. She was pleased of her figure and felt great pride in looking as beautiful as she truly was. I wore pants and an oversized t-shirt to school every day, making my chest appear even smaller at the start of the school year. All the girls were waiting to see what Elizabeth was wearing, as it was the current fashion for the school year. Nobody even recalled seeing me at school. Elizabeth was a star tennis player who began taking lessons at the age of 10. Her bulk provided her with an advantage in strength and stamina over smaller girls. I was the last guy chosen for any squad in gym class due to my lack of attributes. I overcompensated with perseverance and determination. Long-distance running wasn't a team sport. I wouldn't be knocked down, pushed, or hit. So that was my sport, and I was great at it. Her social calendar was packed with dates with cool guys, wealthy men, renowned athletes, and college fraternity brothers. My calendar remained quite open for the entire 4 years. In the garage, I played with technological gadgets and computers. Every fall, Elizabeth got a new automobile to go to school. I rode my bicycle for 4 years. Elizabeth was usually talking to the males in class. Because my name was Jeff Mullen, we frequently sat near each other in class. In 4 years, she spoke to me only once. The instructor was giving out tests when Elizabeth turned to me, handed me the test, and said, "Here." Her father owned Miller Manufacturing, a well-known and lucrative local business. It was founded by her grandfather, is currently run by her father, and employed 160 residents. One of these individuals was my father, a machinist at the facility. His sole work since returning from the service. Elizabeth sat next to me at graduation, and I thought I was going to milk my trousers. She didn't appear to be wearing a skirt or slacks under her graduation gown. It was tough for me to contain myself. She glanced at me strangely many times as I squirmed to conceal my erection. Update. After graduating, I went to college to study industrial engineering. I read that Elizabeth won a full scholarship to play tennis at a famous institution. Her photo was on the sports page of our local newspaper several times during my college freshman and sophomore years. I got 6 inches taller and gained 50 pounds of muscle while running over Christmas vacation. This is my junior year. I went home to see my parents. One evening, I went to a party hosted by one of my classmates. Elizabeth was there, looking gorgeous and spectacularly intoxicated. Her intoxicated lover of the week was making derogatory remarks about her. She slapped him hard and declared, "I'm out of here. Please do not call me ever again." I was the only one there who wasn't falling down intoxicated. She informed me that I was taking her home. She was completely inebriated and stumbled to my car. I drove her to one of our classmates' apartments where she was staying during Christmas break. Her pal spent the holidays at her grandparents' house. She began vomiting just as I had stopped the car. She did not open the door in time to vomit outside the automobile. My car door turned into a cascade of beer puke. I moved her out of the car and onto the sidewalk where she fell and was unable to get up. It was a chore, but I got her up and into the apartment before rushing her to the restroom. She spent 20 minutes as soon as she declared she was finished. I began to pull her up, and she unloaded on me with a full facial. While I was carrying her, she dyed her clothes pink. Great. The girl I lusted after for 4 years in high school has just made the bathroom of amateurism, with Elizabeth standing there covered in puke. I assumed she needed to take off those garments and get in the shower. When all of her wet garments were removed and placed in a pile with my dirty clothes, I had the opportunity to marvel at this Amazon beauty. I didn't want to give her a cold shower because I didn't need a fully awake truck. The best strategy was for her to take a good warm shower before going to bed and sleeping it off. She still couldn't stand securely, so I got in the shower with her and a washcloth. I cleansed her face and arms. It's time to wash her hair, so I turned her around. So we met face to face, applied shampoo to her hair, and began working to get it clean. Her face slid to my shoulder, and she whispered something that sounded like mine, which feels good. As she stood there, getting her shampoo, her arms were drooping at her sides. After cleaning her off, we proceeded carefully to the bed, where I covered her beautiful body as she began to snore. The filthy garments had to be washed tonight because I didn't want to bring vomit-soaked clothes back to my parents' place. Just too much explanation. All of the garments were washed together. Then I cleaned up any signs of her illness in the bathroom. By the time I finished the last cleanup, the garments were ready for the dryer. Except they still stank. So they returned to the washer. After doing all of this, I was exhausted and ready to sleep. What better location to sleep than right next to this stunning woman? I justified my decision by thinking about how awful it would be if she vomited while sleeping and died of asphyxiation. So I carefully climbed in alongside her and snuggled as close as I could. I will worry about the sticky purr. Come on. At a later point, she appears as an asterisk. As I gently emerged from the shroud of sleep, the sun shone through the bedroom window. Elizabeth was still cuddled in my arms, but I felt a little movement. She moaned and clutched my arm. She stiffened, realizing something was wrong. She turned to face me, less than a foot apart. What the hell is this? What are you doing on my bed? Who allowed you in here? Each question had a significant increase in volume. She jumped out of bed and stood menacingly before me, legs spread and arms on her hips, eyes blazing. Who in the dark are you? I needed to act quickly, or this little piece of paradise would turn into hell. I jumped out of bed and stood in front of her, saying it forcefully. I'm the guy you told to take you to this apartment while you were drunk. I quote, the guy who kept you out of a cab that was about to take a drunk, pretty girl back to the taxi barn, forcing all the guys to duck. I'm the guy who drove you here last night and you puked in the car. I'm the guy who picked you up from the apartment sidewalk. So you wouldn't lie there and get frostbite or freeze to death. Either of these tragedies would end your tennis career. I am the guy who carried you into this apartment and the bathroom, and I was there to support you while you prayed to the porcelain god of toiletry. I'm the guy you puked on after saying you were all clear. I'm the guy who held you up in the shower to get the vomit off you. I quote, am the guy who put you in bed and stayed with you. So if you vomited in your sleep, you wouldn't die from asphyxiation. I am the guy who was not in love with you while you were drunk. That is who I am, and why I came here. You don't recall last night, and I understand your confusion. Her posture remained unchanged, but the snarling mouth softened. She quietly commented, I must have really tied one on last night. I remember snippets of things, but nothing coherent. Do I know you? You recognize me, but don't remember me. My name is Jeff Mullen, and I sat next to you in almost all of our high school classes. I was the skinny guy wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Geek squared, Elizabeth said. You have got to be kidding me. I do remember you getting better grades than me. I copied from you on several tests I confessed with, to be honest with you. I made sure you could see my test. I was too shy to talk to you, and I thought you might say something to me because I couldn't say anything to you. We both laughed at that, and the tension of us waking up nude together lessened. I said, now that you know I am not Jack the Ripper, can I get you some toast and black coffee to counteract the vile alcohol you consumed last night? She smiled and said, yes, please. As I turned to walk to the kitchen, I checked Elizabeth out in the mirror on the wall. I saw she was also checking me out, and saw a slight smile and nod of her head as the coffee was brewing. I toasted some bread and put butter and a generous portion of grape jelly on it for a sugar rush for energy to start the day. On the kitchen counter, I found a small white apron with a plate in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. I returned to the bedroom to a raucous laugh from Elizabeth. She enjoyed my attempt at modesty by lifting the apron as I set the coffee and plate on the nightstand. She said this bread has a lot of jelly on it. Would you bring me a napkin? Because I am going to spill this. I smiled and said, you don't need a napkin. I will gladly lick it off of you. Grape jelly is my favorite. I can't get enough of it. With a grin, I went back to the kitchen to retrieve my cup of coffee. When I returned, she had grape jelly all around her mouth. She smiled and said, upset. I guess I spilled on myself with a big smile. I started kissing. Neither one of us moved. There was no need. We both were completely satisfied at this point. I don't know if we were asleep or in deep contemplation. It didn't matter. Sometime later. I don't know when she looked at me and said, are you ready to duck me? I beamed and said, I thought you would never ask. She said, I don't know if I can give you what you gave me, but I know I will have a good time. After shower, we found a dry spot on the sheets and just relaxed while holding each other. I asked her why she was staying at Carol's instead of with her parents. She replied very quietly, it's complicated. Has to do with family dynamics. I don't get along well with my brothers. Quickly, I changed the subject too. What are you doing later today? She changed the look on her face to a more pleasant look and said, Morning is running pre-Christmas errands and I have a tennis match at 2 p.m. There's a foot of snow on the ground, How can you play tennis? I asked. Indoor tennis court at the country club, Jeff. Life was working out well for me. As in November, I had arranged a job interview for 1 p.m. today. Interesting how fate works. My job interview I had arranged was with Robert Miller, president and chairman of the board of Miller Manufacturing, Inc. What are the odds of having a job interview with a man whose daughter I ducked that morning and planned to duck her again this evening? The last suit I had worn was at my high school graduation, so I had purchased a new suit last week for this meeting. I was pumped and scared for this meeting, regardless of what happened between Elizabeth and I this morning. With a deep breath, I pushed the door to Miller Manufacturing corporate office open and said hello to my cousin Sally. My mother and Sally's mother were sisters, with Sally being born 5 years before me. Sally smiled at me and had me take a seat while she went to tell Mr. Miller his appointment had arrived. After winking at Sally, I strode into an office that had wood paneling that probably denuded a small oak forest. Mr. Miller stood and shook my hand and asked me to sit in one of the overstuffed chairs under portraits of himself and his father. Mr. Miller asked me why I wanted to speak to him. I told him I am a junior at State University and I'm looking for a summer internship, and Miller Manufacturing was top of my list. Mr. Miller said, Why Miller Manufacturing? There are other high-flying companies that would attract a bright young man like yourself. Sir, this town is my home. I went to school here. My family has lived here for over 100 years. My father has worked here since he came back from the army. I remember coming into your shop here as a little boy with my father and admiring the big machinery. I inherited a strong industrial understanding from my father. I think I can be of great value to your organization. This town is not where college graduates with my GPA want to move to. They want Chicago, Dallas, or Houston. I want to be here in this town working for your company. I know I have to prove myself to you, but I'm willing to do what it takes to do that. My plan is to be a summer intern with you this year, with the prospect of you hiring me full-time next May. Jeff, you said you are a junior and graduated from our local high school. Did you know my daughter Elizabeth? Oh boy. I've really got to watch out here, I thought while gulping. I said, I knew your daughter in high school, but we did not travel in the same circles. Mr. Miller responded, I don't remember you being one of the long line of boys that came through my house. What will you do for me this summer, Jeff? To his comment, I said, Sir, I will start by sweeping floors, cleaning, and emptying trash cans in my industrial efficiency class. This summer I completed a case study on your organization. That sentence brought him to the edge of his chair. Go on, he said. Miller Manufacturing shuts production down each day at 4 p.m. to clean equipment, sweep floors, and restock input material. You are using your highest-paid personnel to do janitorial job $12 per hour against $50 per hour. I recommended having machinists work until 5 p.m., then walk off the premises. Janitorial staff, lower-paid employees, and summer interns will then do what is needed to conclude the day and prep for tomorrow. You have to make sure these lesser-paid workers modify their hours. So even if they stay after 5 p.m., they do not exceed 40 hours a week. Jeff, can you provide me with a copy of your analysis? Certainly, sir. I don't have a copyright yet, though, which brought about a good laugh. How much would having this brain power cost me this summer, Jeff? My approach, Mr. Miller, is to have you decide the price starting at state minimum wage. Then allow me to earn any increases. Mr. Miller stated that you have persuaded me that we do need some fresh blood around here. Let's make you our first summer intern next June. Should I send you a contract? No, sir. I claimed I didn't need a contract. Your handshake is good enough for me. With that, I rose and left his office, winking at Sally as I went. Update 1. Talk about having a nice mood. So good, I thought. I was invincible. With this in mind, I traveled to the country club to observe Elizabeth's tennis lesson. When I entered the building, I could hear an intense match of volleying back and forth. I picked a quiet nook and watched her play. She was powerful, quick, graceful, and fiercely competitive, never giving up on any shot that might go past her. I was pleased that I was able to initiate a friendship with her when she won the set and went for her towel and water bottle. She saw me. I was amazed she recognized me wearing a suit. She summoned me to the court, kissed me, and expressed gratitude for taking an interest in my tennis. Elizabeth, you're exerting a lot of energy. Can I take you out to dinner and replenish your carbohydrates? Yes, you can. Jeff picked me up around 6:30 p.m. from my flat. Okay, I'll be there, I replied with a grin. We went to Lena's for pizza and beer and spent time getting to know each other. All you have to do is ask Elizabeth a question about herself, and you are ready for the evening. She has a lot to say and is an extremely intriguing person. She adores tennis and aspires to play professionally before becoming a coach. She was quite impressed that I had come to watch her practice tennis. Most of her previous lovers couldn't care less about her activities besides evading her. She enjoyed my interest in her life beyond the bedroom. When I asked her about her family, she was reluctant to discuss anything. She had 2 older brothers who worked at Miller Manufacturing and didn't appear to like either of them. She described one as a sleazy salesman and the other as a timid bookkeeper. Her father was a wonderful man who spent the majority of his life working. Mother was the queen bee. Asterisk made life horrible for everyone around her. This explains her father's time at the plant. We had spent more than an hour talking about her. She questioned me why I came to my tennis match dressed in a suit. Don't you know anything about tennis? I answered. Yes, I play, but not at your level. I just wanted to see what you were interested in. I was dressed in a suit because I had an interview this afternoon for a summer intern position with the intention of being hired there following graduation. I scheduled the appointment last month when I knew I'd be home for Christmas. How did the interview go, Jeff? Excellent. I was hired as a summer intern in June and aimed to work my way up to full-time status before graduation. She then spoke the words I dreaded. Which company? With extreme caution, I said. I spoke with the president of Miller Manufacturing today. Elizabeth exclaimed, What you did! What you met with my father! Before I could say anything, she spoke. Your mother is ducking son of a b****. I felt you were unique in using me to get to my father. Unbelievable. As she stood up to depart, I grasped her arm firmly. Sit down. I just told you I scheduled this appointment last month. You have no idea what my name was earlier this week. Our hookup occurred well after the appointment was scheduled. I informed you that my major is industrial engineering. What other companies in town could I work for besides Miller Manufacturing? Please be quiet for a moment and let this sink in. I'm not exploiting you to get to your father. Please, Elizabeth, do not allow this odd coincidence ruin our evening. Her look would have cut me into one of the plant's plasma cutters. She sat and took deep breaths as if she had just lost the first set of the tennis match. Finally, she remarked, I understand, but how coincidental is it that you appear out of nowhere the day before you have an appointment with my father and the same day you start ducking me? There are very little chances of that happening. Did my name come up during the conversation? I replied that, yeah, it did. She rolled her eyes and resumed her laser look, saying, Your father asked if we were in the same class and if I knew you. I informed him that we were in the same class but went in separate circles. That was the extent of my comments. He stated I didn't resemble any of the young guys who had gone to his house to meet you, Elizabeth. I wanted to tell you about this before your father asked you if you knew his new summer intern. He didn't want you to be surprised by the inquiry. I appreciate it, Jeff. Telling me before father inquired about you. You were considerate to do so. What does this mean for the two of us? Dating and holding her hand? I told her that I genuinely appreciate your company. You are the most fascinating individual I have ever encountered. I truly want this relationship to progress. Working as a temp for your father this summer is not a huge deal. He may fire me on the first day. So let's see where this leads us. Are you okay with that? She grinned and continued, You have your goal of working in industrial engineering. Mine is tennis. We may go our separate ways, but for now, let us enjoy ourselves and each other. Speaking of which, Let us return to the apartment. We went to the flat stripped for the next 4 nights. But all good things come to an end. Elizabeth shed a tear when we both had to leave town and return to school. We saw each other every day for several weeks. The calls were then converted into emails. Valentine's Day cards were sent with messages of affection. Update. On June 1st, I began my summer internship with Miller Manufacturing. It was exciting to understand how the parts were created and the engineering that went into each product as the company's first summer intern. All of the workers at the plant treated me well and appreciated my interest in their work. It helped because my father was the department head. Mr. Miller agreed to my notion of having lower-level workers clean the shop on some days, and one day in mid-June I was sweeping the floor at closing time when I heard a female voice say, "A janitor. My lover is a janitor. Oh my God, how embarrassing for me." I turned around to find a stunning Elizabeth in a colorful summer dress. I moved to hug her, but she pushed me back. I don't hug unclean janitors. I would hug a brilliant young intern if he was tidy and ready to take me out to supper. My response was that I'd arrange for a clean, bright young intern to meet you at any time and location you specified. 6 p.m., my parents' house. I'm not sure if he knows his way around the finer part of town. Either way, I'll depart at 605. If he cannot find it, I'll let him know. She quickly pivoted, allowing the hem of her loose blue dress to fly up, revealing her tanned and muscular legs. The guys leaving the shop howled with laughter at this encounter. This was not something I was going to forget. My automobile arrived in the Miller home driveway about 5:45 p.m. I was not going to be late to meet Elizabeth, however. Sidelight on the front entrance. Elizabeth noticed me pull up, but she did not answer the door. Okay, I'll play the game, I decided. At 5:55 p.m. I approached the front door and pressed the doorbell. This was a good thing. I wore beautiful khaki slacks and my best dress shirt to this function. A beautifully dressed black woman opened the door and asked, "May I help you?" "Yes, ma'am, you may." "Jeffrey Mullen, please visit Miss Elizabeth Miller. The black lady responded with a small grin. "Yes, Mr. Mullen. Miss Elizabeth is expecting you. Please take a seat." At precisely 6 p.m., Elizabeth appeared down the stairwell, smiled at me, and said, "I expected you not to show up. The janitor rarely comes to the front door of the board chairman's residence. You quote, recorrect. The janitor does not. But the first ever summer intern did. Could I introduce you to my parents? Elizabeth asked. I'd be glad to meet them, was my response. Elizabeth led me behind her into the spacious family room where her father was reading and her mother was watching television. "Father, Mother, I'd like to introduce you to my evening date, Mr. Jeffrey Mullen." I turned to Mr. Miller, nodded, and said, "Good evening, sir." Mr. Miller smiled and replied, "Nice to see you, Jeff." Then I replied to her mother, "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Miller." At which point she grinned. "This is your janitor friend. Surely you might find a young man with greater standards," she shot back at her mother. Mother. "I suppose Jeffrey has big aspirations, so much so that please do not wait for me to return home tonight. I almost died in the family room. Why does she put me on the position like this? Wow, it was unexpected." Elizabeth took my arm and gently murmured, "Come, Jeffrey. It's been so long since I've seen you." I turned to the stunned pair and spoke. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Miller." "Good night, sir. Mrs. Miller is just haram." Mr. Miller smirked and spoke. 7:30 a.m. tomorrow." "Okay, Jeff," I returned with, "Yes, sir." Elizabeth was laughing so hard she couldn't take a breath when we got into the car. I was stunned. I wasn't sure if I should be upset, humiliated, or just laugh it off. I asked, "What was that all about? Why would you do that to me? Why did you do that to them? I just don't get what the point of that was." Elizabeth giggled and remarked, "This is a demonstration to my mother of why we are together, quick-witted and able to handle any scenario. You were cool, calm, and collected this evening, just as you were thrown to the wolves by Mrs. Miller. I could not have scripted your conduct any better." From Marjorie at the door to her mother's reaction, "You were on top of it." This pleases me, Elizabeth. I like our time together, whether it's in or out of bed. However, I'm scared about my job tomorrow. How will your father react to your audacious antics? This job is vital to me. Your tennis is just as important to you. Would you please consider what I want to achieve or be in my life? I value what you value. Could you please give me the same consideration? I'm used to having my way, Jeff, but I'll attempt to consider your feelings before causing a problem for you. I changed the subject and asked Elizabeth. I haven't heard from you for a few weeks. What up? She replied. Does this address your question? I have surely missed you during the last few months, Elizabeth. I am pleased you missed me, Jeff. It makes me feel valuable to you. After we were seated in the best steakhouse in town, I stated. May, I propose a toast to your presence in town, which makes it a great place to be. After drinking a glass of red wine, I inquired as to how long you had been in town. And why have you stopped by without first calling me? I had not planned this vacation. Father summoned me back to sign some business papers because I serve on Miller Manufacturing's board of directors. As you try to earn more points with me tonight, keep in mind that I am also your supervisor at Miller Manufacturing. It would be a pity if I posted a terrible performance on one of your references. I tried to act astonished, but I had investigated Miller's business structure before starting as a summer intern and was aware of her standing. Oh, comma, really? I didn't realize that. I was met with, like hell you didn't. And Elizabeth's sneaky smile. I raised my glass, tapped hers, and smiled back. She was aware that I had conducted my investigation and discovered that Elizabeth, John, and Sam each owned 30% of the shares, with numerous older workers owning a combined 10%. Mr. Miller held voting rights to all of their stock. Because I had to be at work by 7:30 a.m., and Elizabeth didn't get much sleep last night. We didn't get to speak or duck that morning. She flew off shortly before noon that day. She worked tennis camps in Wisconsin all summer. She taught, babysat, did some housework, and played a lot of tennis. We exchanged letters, phone calls, and emails, but didn't communicate until Christmas. She had her world, and I had mine. Update 3. I spent the rest of my summer learning about precision components production. Miller had been operating a long time and had a large client base, particularly in the aircraft industry. They did considerable business with Boeing, Spirit Aerosystems, and Cessna. John Miller, Robert Miller's firstborn child and Elizabeth's oldest sibling, was the head of marketing for Miller Manufacturing. When he found out I was Elizabeth's boyfriend, he thought I was a complete inconvenience. He made a concerted effort to disregard his younger sister. He referred to her as the boss's sister rather than Elizabeth. B asterisks in heels or just plain bossy. He was 8 years older than Elizabeth, and she took great pleasure in aggravating him at every opportunity. According to Robert, John knew nothing about marketing near-tolerance produced parts. He followed the traditional selling credo of getting them drunk, laid, and signed in the 1960s and 1970s. The knowledgeable order buyers spoke with the shop foreman directly to determine the number of products and requirements required by their companies. That didn't stop John from spending a lot of corporate money drinking and partying in the company's name. Robert put up with it since he was family, and John, his wife, and children would go hungry if he had to work for someone else. Middle brother Sam was a sad case, silent, difficult to communicate with, and completely useless in his work as material procurement manager. Often, the entire plant had to be shut down because Sam did not order the proper material for manufacture away from the plant. All he did was drink and fish. His attendance at work was inconsistent. Brother John claimed he was relentlessly tormented by domineering and lacked the courage to confront her. She had broken him after discovering him mass-beating in the bathroom with a muscular magazine that had struck a magazine. She informed everyone it was a gay magazine, and Sam couldn't say differently. He was unmarried and kept to himself. With my inquisitive mind, I found myself discovering new processes and products for Miller Manufacturing. While fiddling about, I devised a novel method for quickly releasing farm equipment from tractors. I told Dad about my idea and my intention to bring it to Robert's attention. Dad said, "Don't waste your time. Robert will hand it to John, who will laugh and throw it away. If Robert questions John about it, John will give it to Sam to calculate out the cost of supplies and where it will die." A second death. Several of the employees had marketable ideas, but they were all destroyed. I asked Dad about seeking a patent for the company, but he said it would be the same destiny as other concepts. Since one of my advanced industrial engineering lectures focused on perfecting patents, I opted to tackle it alone. The first thing I had to do was form a limited liability organization called Mullen Marketing, LLC. I built and tested the prototype in my spare time and after work. I needed to hire a patent attorney, so I contacted Craig, a local attorney. Craig and I had met numerous times around town and played golf together on men's night. He was a senior when I was a sophomore in high school. He said his law school friend works for a patent firm, so he connected me with a contact. By the end of the summer, I had submitted 4 patent applications. Elizabeth and I kept in touch via email and phone calls during this time. Her entire life revolved around tennis, whereas mine was focused on engineering. We got to spend one night together during Christmas because Robert was taking the family to Naples, Florida for the holidays. It was a wonderful reunion for the two of us, complete with tons of ducking, lying in a hotel room, and simply being ourselves. We discussed the future and how we would fit into it. No choices were made, but ideas were tossed about. The spark between us was still present. While I was prepared for my final college exams, my attorney contacted and informed me that he had discussed my pattern with his patent attorney partner. "Would you take a $250,000 check for your quick release patent?" "Absolutely, I would," I exclaimed. Craig said his friend agreed, but he believed you could get a $1 per unit royalty for 10 years if you pressed for more. Craig warned me that this should be kept private. After all, you did all the work at the Miller plant. I know John Miller would do everything in his power to keep you from receiving any of this money. Just deposit it in Mullen Marketing and use it when you truly need it. Don't tell your father because the other employees will be jealous and word will spread. Craig also offered me another deal. He knew I was returning to town to work for Miller. He asked if I planned to live at home. I told him for the time being, but they would like me to go shortly. He claimed the bank had a really nice residence. They foreclosed and wanted to sell. The interior was beaten up, but the construction was sound. It required extensive cosmetic work, which I believed I could do. We could use some of the patent money as a down payment, and the bank would bear the rest. I consented and became a homeowner. Robert Miller and I agreed that I would work full-time as the chief engineering officer for Miller Manufacturing. The compensation was lower than that of my classmates, but this position has the potential to be highly successful for me. Good thing I was young and eager since I worked 45 hours a week and then went home to rebuild my new home. There is no time for parties, and women are no longer available. I tried to call Elizabeth as much as possible, but she was getting started on the tour and was difficult to reach. One day she simply stepped into the house. While I was painting, the living room was a shambles with fallen clothing and covered furniture. Her response was, "What kind of pigsty are you creating here?" I believe it will be more like a love hut than a pigsty. I replied to her harsh reply that I couldn't verify it. "You have no taste or flair at all. It's embarrassing to be in here, and I'm staring at your finished work. It appears that you are rebuilding a barn. You've been working on it for months. Why not simply finish it? That's what I'm doing. Finishing. I also have a job." "Elizabeth, board members are constantly watching my back," I replied with a smirk. She waved her hand magnificently and stated, "Just hire someone." "I came here for love, but I don't want to duck in this construction zone. Reserve us a room at the Hyatt for tonight." Of course, I granted her wish. Or was it a command that was well rewarded? Later in the evening, Elizabeth would generally show up uninvited between tournaments during the summer. We would spend time together. Then she'd disappear for weeks. She once brought her laundry to my house when she was at home. As she tossed her full bag on the floor, a packet of rubbers fell out. I looked at the package, then up at her, and she shrugged, saying, "A girl can never be too careful." She smirked. I wanted to be upset, but we weren't married, engaged, or even living together, so I had little standing other than pride. I attended a couple tournaments owing of the convenient travel arrangements. I once made arrangements with her before attending. We had a terrific time, but I observed a few males approach her to talk, and she would wave them off, and they would say something like, "Oh, I forgot. Sorry." It looked that if I were not present, some socialization would occur. We continued this long journey until the tennis tours ended. My work was going well. I had implemented a number of procedures that increased the plant's efficiency and profitability. As I learned more about the products we created, more patent ideas sprang to mind. By the end of the first year, I had saved quite a bit of money. This arrangement worked effectively for Miller Manufacturing since I paid the bench rate for the labor required by our workers on my projects and the full amount for input materials and supplies. I promoted these patents. I took extra care to ensure that Miller Manufactured produced the first run of the new patent manufactured. I was bringing in new business, as was our marketing director, Dot. The house was many stories above the pigsty. The next time Elizabeth stopped by to see me, she was agitated because the road was getting to her. She dropped her father's medical plan and needed extra downtime at no expense to her. She could muster it. She did not want to spend time with her folks. It was then that I received an inspiration. I turned to her and asked, "Why don't you marry me? You can have a health plan, spend time in a relaxing environment, and be with someone you care about." I was expecting a big belly laugh from her. She placed both hands on either side of my face and commented, "That is so sweet, so sweet. I suppose I'll accept your offer." That was not what I expected, but I will accept the outcome. I had scored a young man's triple, a new wife who is beautiful, likes to duck me, and is quite affluent. What might go wrong? The wedding preparations were a fiasco. If I thought Elizabeth and her mother didn't get along previously, this was like battle between them. Mother wanted a high society party affair with her friends. Elizabeth desired a more informal atmosphere with more tennis players and sorority sisters at a bridal and groom moms meeting. Neither of the Miller women sought my mother's thoughts or opinion, only yelling and screaming between the two. Mrs. Miller still referred to me as the janitor boy. My mother walked out of the meeting and neither of them noticed her or cared. We ended up getting married in Las Vegas. We both felt the happiest we had ever been. I had an excellent job. She was on tour, but she returned home as frequently as she could to find plenty of fun, love, and company. We were good together. Life was good for a few years, with her still on tour. She wasn't making much money, but she was holding her own. She continued to get a large quarterly dividend on her Miller Manufacturing stock. I told her she may share some of it with me because I was the source of the payout. She said, "You're lucky I haven't fired or demoted you back to janitor." A few months later, she called me, crying and cursing. I didn't comprehend what she was saying. "Should I come out there?" She said yes. So I took a flight that night. I entered her hotel room and discovered her with her right leg elevated and a bag of ice on it. It appears that she tore or strained her ankle. We left to get medical care at home instead of on the road. Our doctor suspected that the ankle was stretched rather than torn, but an MRI would confirm. While in the prep room, the nurse went through the checklist and asked whether she was expecting. Elizabeth said, "No, I'm on the pill," the nurse stated. "We need to confirm that on all women your age prior to the MRI, so please take this pregnancy test." Elizabeth emerged from the bathroom with an ashen face. "This is incorrect. I am not pregnant. I cannot be pregnant. I'm on the pill and utilize massage." She paused mid-sentence. "What's this? Is she going to claim she used rubbers when? Not with me. This requires further investigation. I have to be really careful here." The nurse administered a second brand of pregnancy test and the findings were identical. Elizabeth was inconsolable. "Please, not right now." I attempted to reassure her that everything would be all right because she would be out of commission for nearly a year before being able to resume competitive tennis. Elizabeth secured a position as the girls' high school tennis coach, while she couldn't play. She did an outstanding job of teaching the girls' tennis strategy beyond simply slapping the ball back across the net. Her children won the state meet for their class. She was able to use the school's athletic equipment to rehab and strengthen her knee. To say Elizabeth did not like pregnancy would be an understatement. Every day the stomach grew. So did the B*. Teaching. There was nothing right with the world. When I inquired if she planned to breastfeed, she answered, "No way in hell. My award-winning Thai actress, TTS, will just transform two into two empty meat bags hanging from my chest." Her delivery did not go well, and she was in labor for quite some time. I was in the delivery room when the nurse announced, "You are the proud mother of 2 baby boys." In her drug and pain-induced daze, she inquired, "Are they black? Are they black? They simply cannot be black." "No, they're white," the nurse responded with an attitude. Her fidelity was called into question once more, but there was no proof. While in the hospital, she instructed the doctor to perform a tubal ligation so that she would not become pregnant again. I told her it would be easier for me to get a vasectomy than for her to have her tubes tied. She replied, "No, I want my tubes tied." I considered the possibility that even if I had a vasectomy, she could become pregnant by a boyfriend. That may have been the reason for her sterilization, not mine. When we returned home with Cameron and Cody, my mother and grandma were waiting to help. Elizabeth had little, if any, parental qualities. Therefore, she welcomed their assistant. My grandmother was a lively 70-year-old who adored babies. She stayed at our residence from 8 until 5 p.m. most days, for the first 2 months. Elizabeth was overjoyed to have her personal nanny at our home. She continued physical therapy to repair her knee and prepare to play competitive tennis again. After a year, my mother quit from teaching and became a full-time babysitter for us. Elizabeth was totally mobile and able to play tennis again. With her mobility restored, Elizabeth began attending tennis matches, tournaments, clinics, symposiums, and anything else with the word tennis in it. After all, she was wealthy, unemployed, and relied on others to care for her family. Given that I already had some reservations about her loyalty, I had a private investigator bug her car for both location and audio. They also hacked her phone, allowing me to access text and email information. This was pricey, but so is divorce. Her mood did not appear to improve, as nothing in our house was suitable for her. I'd painted the rooms the wrong color. She needed extra closet space. My family heirlooms needed to go into storage. Anything related to me seemed unworthy of being in her home. I attempted to go home early from work to help her around the house, but all I did was annoy her. Everything I did, from folding towels to vacuuming to taking out the trash, was scrutinized and belittled. Nothing I did could make her happy. After my mother went for the day, I became the primary caretaker for the boys. This was the only thing that made me happy in the house. She found it annoying to live in a middle-class area. Everyone was beneath her in terms of style, social standing, and economic level. She had received a nice dividend check from Miller and planned to spend it all because there would be another one in 90 days. She required us to join the country club with our own membership. She would eat lunch at the country club every day as long as the lads were kept under supervision. This really bothered me since she was wasting money and disregarding our children. By this point, I had the boys' DNA tested, and I was their father. Our hungry love life shrunk to a fraction of what it once was. I conducted some online abnormal psychology study. She maintains control at all times. By this point, the numbers for divorce were far outnumbering those for marriage. I had to get out of here somehow. She had me by the balls and knew it. I adored the guys, and she would use it against me. She was a co-owner of my employer. Therefore, they would complete my work. Miller Manufacturing was well known in the industry, and a poor reference from them would have a negative impact on my career. My pie was presenting me with proof that she was cheating on me. My pie introduced me to an unusual trick. He held me with a tiny vibrator. He advised not to clean the vibrator after usage, but rather take it to the lab to see if anyone else had left DNA markers. My rescue came from an odd source: real estate. She decided she'd had enough of this middle-class squalor and that we needed to buy the multi-million-dollar country club mansion. The payments would deplete her dividend check. She didn't care. She demanded the house. I believe it was because it was larger and more expensive than her mother's home. At the same time, I was in the process of purchasing very pricey CNC equipment for my LLC to lease to Miller. By this point, Robert Miller had passed away, and I was essentially running the plant. John was president, but he left everything except setting dividends to me. I had a new title, operational manager, and informed John that I needed a new job description. So he said, "Okay, do it." My friend Craig came to mind, and we created a new job description that provided me a lot of freedom to do things my way, including purchasing equipment that was desperately needed to remain competitive. My purchases were limited to $500,000 without board approval. The modeler would purchase the machine and lease it to Miller. The physical plant required significant renovations, which ate into net income and cut dividends. While Mullen machine was highly profitable. However, I still required a loan to purchase the equipment. I asked my banker about Elizabeth's pricey property and my simultaneous purchase of machinery. He told me I couldn't get my equipment loan if I was on the new house note. She couldn't acquire a loan without proving my income. We were at a standstill until Craig offered to draw out a post-nuptial arrangement. The post-nuptial agreement was quite comparable to an amicable divorce settlement. I would sign over whatever financial stake I held in any of her personal assets, including Miller Manufacturing shares. I would not sign the house deed or the promissory note for the new mansion. I would, however, pay bossy rent every month I stayed in the house. The rent was equal to 1/2 of the mortgage payment, plus insurance and taxes. Craig did an excellent job of getting this disclaimer into the post. Not. He understood my ultimate goal was to be entirely out of her control. She had no idea how much time I would have to pay rent. Craig, S write-up, implied that I promised to pay half of everything for the rest of my life. Exactly like a divorce, I displayed no debt for this costly home. As a result, she and her attorney believe I can expand with the Mullen Marketing LLC financing I require. I only had my small LLC and my clothing. I couldn't touch her belongings. In their hubris, they had no interest in acquiring half of my meager possessions. They had no idea that her company's stock was losing value on a daily basis. As a result, her dividends would decrease, making it increasingly difficult to meet all of her obligations. She had backed herself into a steep canyon, with no way out, and she didn't realize it. While putting together the post, I'm sure her attorney was either ducking her or wanted to duck her, so he left her make the decision. After all, she understands everything and doesn't require any advice. Now that the asset split is complete, I can begin working on John Miller's shares. John was heavily in debt since he spent more than his salary and company dividends. Alcohol, drugs, fast cars, and fast women had taken their toll. I was usually friendly to his wife, Sherry, and she called one day to seek for my assistance in getting John to reduce his spending. She was noticing the writing on the walls. She was just one bimbo away from divorcing him. I assured her I will try, and I spoke with John, who told me to mind my own business. And if I couldn't control my own wife, how could I talk to him about changing his bad habits? I answered, "You are probably correct, John. I just want you to know that I care about you. And if you get in difficulty, you can rely on me to help you." He shifted his tone and thanked me for my care. I sincerely intend to help him by purchasing his shares at a bargain. I just have to wait until he's in a jam. That jam occurred a month later when he was arrested for DUI with cocaine in his possession. He informed me that he needed at least $1 million to get out of trouble. Trouble included gambling debts owed to those who did not believe in pursuing collection alternatives through the courts. John understood that if he went to jail without paying his obligations, he wouldn't get it out alive. I told him I would lend him $1 million against his $6 million worth of stock. However, he would need to turn over all of the shares and voting rights to me. I informed him that he could repurchase the stock for $1 million at any point within the next year, interest-free. This agreement was not transferable. John was really appreciative for my assistance with court charges and gaming debts. John had just enough money to move to Las Vegas and become a professional gambler. That was his lifelong dream. This assured me that he would never repurchase his stock on time. The bank took my Miller Manufacturing shares and my LLC stock as collateral for the loan. Craig drafted the deal and congratulated me on taking ownership of John's stock. I now controlled 40% of the outstanding stock, including employee stock. With an additional 11%, I would have controlling interest. Update 6. Sam Miller was assigning me more and more procurement chores. Since we met, he has either been absent from the office or has been sitting at his desk and watching outside. I asked him what was wrong. Sam stated, "I simply cannot do this anymore. It is too much pressure for me to handle. My doctor has prescribed me the maximum antidepressant dosage. Jeff, I need to get out of here or die of a stroke. I understand you lent money to my brother when he was in trouble. I appreciate you doing this." I hesitated and continued, "I'll do everything I can to help you. First, what do you want to do with the remainder of your life?" Sam stated that there is nothing more appealing to me than to simply live in my house, in the woods, fishing and hunting all day. There is nobody around, no pressure, no expectations, and no drama. My mind was on point. "Do you want to sell me your Miller Manufacturing stock?" "No," Sam replied. "I tried, but no one wants to acquire 30% of Miller Manufacturing stock, not with John and Elizabeth in control of the shares. They know that those two will just screw over any minority ownership, just as they did with me. Then I'll have to worry about making a sensible investment. And do I have enough to survive on? Can you just pay me a certain amount every month for the rest of my life, and I'll transfer my stock to you? Sam, I can do that. Jeff, how much do you require per month? I can happily live on $10,000 per month. Sam, I can do that. Let me prepare the papers, and you can tidy up your office and submit your resignation. Thank you, Jeffrey. You're a wonderful friend to assist me out. Craig was thrilled when I informed him I wanted a lifetime contract to pay Sam $10,000 every month. He was almost shouting. Sam would have to live over 50 years to receive the full value of his stock. Furthermore, Sam is a sick man. He will not survive 10 years. That is correct, Craig, but he will be delighted for the entire 10 years, the way this is done. You, my buddy, have complete power of Miller Manufacturing. Congratulations! Crack! Exclaimed the speaker. Thank you, Craig. I appreciate your legal knowledge in creating these agreements. The lies AB** no longer have authority over me or the lads. It's time to start putting the screws into her. Despite the fact that I had spent so much time fixing up my first house in town, it was not suitable for Elizabeth. I simply did not want to sell it. I had kept it as a rental, but my last tenants had left 5 months ago, and I hadn't found any new ones. This was fortunate for me and the boys. It was September 1st, and Elizabeth was in New York for the U.S. Open tennis tournament, watching the action and ducking somebody or something. I was able to easily move the few personal items I was permitted to keep in the mansion to our old home. By the evening, the boys and I had all settled in. They stopped asking about Mommy because she was rarely present, and when she was, she terrified them. I tried calling her a few times I knew would be inconvenient if she had a new lover. I either got her voicemail or a very brief dismissal. There were no return calls after we had removed all of our personal belongings from the mansion. I left a note for Elizabeth stating that I would not be providing her with the September rent check because I had moved out. The first thing the next morning at the office was for Sally to send a 14-day notice to all stockholders of a meeting, stockholder changes, leadership changes, and dividend approval for the third quarter were all discussed. She asked, "There is a lot going on around here that I'm not aware of. Could you please fill me in case anyone asks? Wonderful news. Sally, I now own all of John and Sam's Miller Manufacturing stock and control 70% of the voting rights. Elizabeth has only 30%, rendering her irrelevant in our lives." Sally was overjoyed, saying, "I have hated that asterisk since she was in high school." Final update. When Elizabeth returned from New York and saw my note about leaving her house, she became enraged. She called me and said, "You have to pay that rent to me because I need it to make my payments. If you don't get me that money, I'll have my dividends increased to compensate. I will ensure that the difference is made up by a reduction in your paycheck. You are making a huge mistake by ducking around with the company's owner." It was clear that she had not spoken with her brothers about the transfer of their stock. I also knew she wouldn't have bothered to read the notice of the stockholders' meeting later that week. "I can't do that, Jeff. That is my only source of income. How will I be able to survive? How can you do this to your beloved wife?" My response was that you are a truly loving wife. You've been loving Jeff, even though it wasn't me. I flirt with some guys, but I have remained faithful to you. Ask anyone around town. Elizabeth, for the past year, I've hired a private investigator to follow you to all of your tennis tournaments. You have a very active following. His folder on you contains a plethora of photos and videos that prove your last statement is false. Her face lost its color. Where was she going to attack now? "If you divorce me, Jeff, you must pay alimony and child support. It will be cheaper to remain married to me." "It was with pleasure," I explained. "If you recall, we distributed our assets in the post, not your attorney. I structured it so that when we divorce, I would have no claim to your assets. You were protecting yourself from me. What once protected you now protects me. So there is no alimony. You have a book value of $6 million of Miller Manufacturing. So the judge will not order alimony." She beamed and said, "Great, just pay me the $6 million and I will be on my way." With a big smile, I said, "Sorry, babe. I don't need your stock to control the company. My 70% already outvote your 30% ownership. I don't need to buy any more stock as I already have complete control. It's almost as if your stock has now become worthless. We don't have to pay dividends either. I can guarantee you that as long as you own stock, this company will never pay a dividend. I will just vote myself a large bonus if I need money. The employees will see big bonuses before you realize a dividend. I will make this building a showplace of modern manufacturing with the profits all done by not paying any dividends to any stockholders. Now then, just to be rid of you, I will pay you $100,000 for all your stock. That's about what a minority share of this company is worth, I continued. You will not receive any child support as the boys live with me. They are afraid of you. I have kept a calendar of the nights you have spent in this house. How can you be the support for the boys when you are out of town, over half the year? Plus, the pie will provide photo and video evidence of your infidelity. I also have some records of the DNA. One time, there was DNA from 3 different men that you brought back to our house. You are an STD hazard to the household. The pie has names and can subpoena men to tell the judge you are an SLU asterisk. No way. You will have custody of those boys. I doubt you will want the stacks of dirty laundry paraded into the courtroom. So the whole city can see what a sleut you are. A big pile of shit smearing the good name of Miller. Why are you doing this to me, Jeff? I love you. I have for years. Why? Why? I responded. You dumped dozens of men after we were married. You left town for weeks without calling or contacting me. You were only concerned about yourself. The boys and I were nothing to you. Now you are nothing to us. Goodbye, Elizabeth. I turned and walked out the door. A free man, a happy father. Elizabeth could not make the next payment on the house or the Mercedes. She put the house on the market. But a property that pricey will take months unless the price is dramatically dropped. Plus, she had very little equity in that residence. The people that served Her Majesty when she lived there say she took her clothes and left town. The property is under foreclosure and the Mercedes is being repossessed. I, however, own a very prosperous firm with $20 million in cash and will never have touch with her again. My private investigator had made numerous contacts on the tennis tour while following Elizabeth. Rumor has it that she is in Las Vegas and playing strip tennis. She and other women will play in the new asterisk dare, sometimes against paying customers with her physique and beauty. She is the star of this live show. It's quite a novelty in Vegas. After her backhand goes out, she will dance at a club off the Vegas Strip. It, quote, either that or lying on her back in a Vegas brothel. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.